Hello, and welcome to Age of Wonders Planetfall. This game, which is the latest in the Age of Wonders series, is going to be coming out on the 6th of August, so many thanks to Paradox Interactive for providing VGR with an early access code. If you're not familiar with Age of Wonders, it's a strategy game which blends kind of hex-based and turn-based battle gameplay with a similar sort of civilization building gameplay. The last entry in the series was Age of Wonders 3, so it's not just been a few years since the last entry, but it's also been a big shift in genre. This is going to be the first sci-fi entry in the series. All up till now have been fantasy. As a result, the factions, units, environments you'll be seeing are going to be pretty different, although, as you'll find out, not as different as you might expect. So in this video we're going to be delving into the Commander Customization system, which is available in Planetfall, and kind of just looking at what you'll have access to and what you'll be able to control before you head into a game. So we're going to boot up a new scenario, and you'll see, as this is a sci-fi setting, we're going to be picking the planet that we start on, so we can pick Imperial, Frontier, Capital, Ravaged, and Infested. And all of them are going to have slightly different traits and kind of options that you have available in-game. Obviously, we're going to be able to set the number of players, we're going to be able to set the difficulty level of both the world and the kind of ambient enemies that appear throughout it, and the NPC enemies that we're going to be facing faction-wise. You can also change the world size and the landmass type. So if we look at Imperial World, this is really the default. You're not going to get anything too weird this way. Frontier worlds are less colonized, so you're more likely to see more sort of bestial factions. In any game, you're going to be getting both sort of main AI factions playing the other playable factions in the game, but you'll also be seeing smaller NPC factions, and they really run the gamut from everything from sort of the remnants of the old Star Union, who are sort of tech-reliant human remnants, to psionically charged fish. We also have capital worlds, which you're gonna. These are really the opposite of Frontier. You're more likely to see the human factions, and it's going to be more populated. Ravaged, and then we also have Infested, which perhaps the most dangerous. Lots of xenoplague enemies, and more sort of environmental hazards. So we're just going to select an Imperial world. We won't be heading into gameplay because we're just going to focus on building commanders. So here we have the Commander Customization screen. So you can see we've got a lot of options of commanders on the left here, and these are all pre-made commanders. So if you want to just jump straight into a match, pick up one of these commanders and just hit start. Of course, you can actually customize these, and that's what we're going to be going into in a moment. So there are 6 factions in the game. You've got the Kirko, the Syndicate, the Amazons, the Dvar, the Assembly, and the Vanguard. And there's defaults for all of them. This is one I made earlier, but we're going to be jumping into another one. So let's, we'll just start on this one and we'll customize. So here we go. This is your first screen for Commander Customization. Now you're first going to want to pick the faction that you're actually going to use. So let's drop back to the Vanguard. Vanguard is really the default human faction. These guys are the closest thing to a human civilization that you're going to see in Age of Wonders Planetfall. The old Star Union, that's collapsed in the lore of this game, and we're now, I think, several hundred years later. If you play through the story campaign, you'll see how exactly that plays out. And the Vanguard are really a remnant faction trying to rebuild humans into a civilization. Fairly standard faction. You get what it says on the tin. These guys are going to be bog standard humans, fairly versatile, not too heavily focused in any one area, fairly reliable units, that sort of thing. Yeah, humans are pretty good at ranged. They're not going to be as good at melee. They do have some melee options, but obviously they're facing up against a lot of alien factions with better melee capabilities. Then you've also got the Kirko. They're another remnant faction from the Star Union, essentially a hive mind of insectile aliens. They have access to the bio and psi weapon groups, so a bit different to the Vanguard. Very much sort of a swarm faction. They can produce infantry fairly quickly, and they also have abilities to spawn new units into battle. Their swarm shields protect units in combat. It's a very useful ability. They get a lot of synergistic abilities to boost swarm shields for adjacent units. And they're also very good at melee. A lot of their standard troops are actually better in melee than they are at ranged. And they can make use of regeneration. Then you have the Syndicate. Now these guys are also human, but they're a bit different to the Vanguard. These guys rely on arc and psi weapons, and you definitely see a lot of psi in the early phases of the game. The arc stuff tends to come in later. They're essentially a faction of slavers and merchants, so they have a lot of indentured slave units, and those units will ignore morale penalties, and then you also have sort of the overseer units who can do a lot of buffing and debuffing and that sort of thing. And they have very good stealth. If you want to go sort of down the covert route, which is available as part of the standard tech tree, then these guys are a really good choice. They have a lot of good stealth units, and that's part of their own racial tech tree, unlocks a lot of specific stealth units. You then have the Amazons. So these guys were human. They've sort of bioengineered themselves to be a bit more than human. And they are going to be using bio and laser, so you've got a bit of Vanguard and Kirko in there. They also have access to genetically engineered beasts, as it reads, and they can kind of terraform planets around them, which is a benefit to them because they thrive in forests. You might begin to notice a bit of a theme here if you're a fan of fantasy, in that the factions in this game, although they are sci-fi factions, there's a very heavy fantasy bent to them. So if we go back to, the Vanguard are the standard humans, Kirko, I suppose don't really have a direct parallel to fantasy. Syndicate, that could apply to almost any aesthetic. Amazons clearly have a sort of elven dryad aesthetic. And then we're going to go into the Dvar, who are perhaps the most outright fantasy race, because these are out-and-out space dwarves. They are miners, industrialists, they have firearms and explosives, very good sort of area of effect, and very strong. Like the Vanguard, they're very good at range, although they do have some good melee options. Very good at producing units and buildings very quickly. They can also terraform, just like the Amazons. You then have the Assembly. Now these are cyborgs. They use arc and firearm weapons. They can reassemble their fallen units, they get extra resources when they win battles. Very good at research, and they got a nice resistance to arc. Once you've picked your faction, you then need to pick your secret technology, and this determines what you're going to focus on research-wise in the game. So when you load up into the game, you've got a variety of different research trees that you're going to be researching throughout the game. One of those is determined by your faction, so like choosing Vanguard is going to give you access to a research tree that will unlock new Vanguard units. There's also the default social and kind of tech trees, and you then also have the secret technology tree. So this provides you with special units, special abilities. So for example, Xenoplague will allow you to spawn special Xenoplague units and also evolve them after battles. You can heal and enhance your biological units, use bioweapons, and that sort of thing. Cynumbra is all about psychic powers, and it's very sort of dark psionic. So you can summon ethereal beings. It's also got a lot of debuffing effects, targeting enemies with psychic damage or insanity. Then we have Promethean, which is all about sort of fire and explosives. Gives you access to incendiary weapons, helps you to settle in places where you'd normally have big penalties, and yeah, you can create weapons of mass destruction. So if you want to just blast your opponents to Kingdom Come, Promethean is probably the way to go. Synthesis is all about AI and hacking. So this will let you kind of override the enemy's mechanical units. You can integrate your own populace into this sort of self-contained network. And it's very good if you're kind of combining arc and kinetic. Plus you get access to AI demons, which are pretty scary if you come up against one. The Celestians, this is sort of the religious order of the game. They use psionic power, but it's a lot more peaceful than the Cynumbra. They get bonuses for diplomacy, they get a lot of morale buffing and that sort of thing, and you can kind of bring enemies, soldiers and colonists kind of over to your side. If you don't want to go too militaristic in your playthrough and you're focusing more on diplomacy, then Celestian's a very good pick. Void Tech This is the sort of space and gravity one. So you can create sort of time clones of your own units, you can teleport, you can decelerate enemies, and pass through obstacles. So very useful kind of set of abilities that you can attach as mods to various units. And of course you've also got your perks. So these are the same for every faction. The only thing that's different is this entry at the bottom that says Xenoblade Close Combat Equipment. That will change based on your secret technology. You have 3 points to spend. Some of these will cost 1 or 2. You'll start with sort of basic equipment unless you go with the close combat option. Your colony supplement, you can get extra, like starting with techs already unlocked, starting with extra energy, starting with a bigger army, and starting with extra population, and a recreation dome, which helps keep your colonists happy. And then you've also got things that will affect your commander and their army, so starting your commander off at level 3, for example, and boosting experience gain for troops, giving you bonus relationship with all races, decreasing weapon research, and so on and so forth. So we're going to take, let's take a Dvar as just a starting example. We're going to go Promethean and just go all combat and production. So Merchant Scion's not going to be hugely useful here if I'm just trying to completely annihilate all my opponents. So I'm going to go with Veteran, which is going to help me bring up my forces quicker. Martial Tradition is useful, but the Ruthless Killer ability I found is only useful when your commanders in battle themselves, and that's useful in the early game, but it decreases later on. So I prefer to have the all units gain experience 15% faster. I think that has more long-term potential. And that does give us still 2 points to spend, so we're going to go straight for military detachment and get that larger starting army. Makes it a lot easier to expand outwards in the early game and kind of take over a lot of the NPC enemy bastions that are scattered all over the map. So here we are in the actual customization screen. As you can see, my description of them being space dwarves is pretty apt. You can assign the name, you can assign the faction colours. We're just going to go with that. And you can also assign a symbol. So let's just grab that one. But where it really comes into is obviously the actual customization. So you can change posture. I'm going to stick with that. And change the background as well. There's a wide variety of different backgrounds with different themes. Yep, that looks good. Some of these are greyed out because the Dvar don't have access to them. Obviously, eyes and skin can't do anything because the Dvar are completely sealed inside their suits. But we can change, for example, the shoulder armor that he has. I should say we can also switch between male and female. Not hugely visible on the Dvar, but it's a bit more obvious on the other races, or some of them anyway. And we can also change the helmets. The Dvar has some pretty fantastic helmets. You can have the fur hat, the mining helmets, and so on. We're going to go with the fur hat. Or another nod to their dwarven origin. A lot of the pipes here are clearly designed to look like beards. So let's go with that one. Change the torso armor, and you can also change the goggles. Go with that one. And the cape. And we're just going to switch race just to give you an example of what the customization looks like for the other races. So if we start over with Vanguard, here we go, fairly standard humans. Kirko are a lot more insectile. So you have additional options for things like tails and wings. And they also have some pretty large sort of headdresses. Syndicate being human, as you can see they're fairly humanoid, but they can get, this one is a little bit more removed from their norm. I mean, if we start to kind of change things up, it starts to look a lot more fantastical. Amazons actually are all female, so they don't have an option to switch gender. And you can see they've got a sort of nature aesthetic to their armor. Something of an elven aesthetic, for sure. And then you have the Assembly, who, are some pretty diverse robots. They're all made of scavenged parts, so there's a lot of variance in their different customization options. So that's going to be it for our first video on Commander customization. I hope that gives you a brief outline as to the 6 different factions and what you're going to have access to when Planetfall launches on the 6th. Our next video is going to go into actual gameplay, so stay tuned for that. And we should have more content coming up for Planetfall very, very soon. We're recording all of this ahead of the embargo, which will be on the 5th. So in all likelihood, there'll be a lot of videos coming up today. So do stay tuned, and I will see you next time.